And now joining us with more on Israeli coalition talks is columnist for Newsweek and editor of HistoryCentral.com, Marc Schulman, and Jeremy Saltan, political strategist and director of English operations with Yamina Hadash. All right, now, thank you both for joining us. Now, with this mandate in the hands of blue and white, in Benny Gantz's hands, can we expect the formation of a unity government? Is there a scenario in which that will take place?
Well, there's a scenario. There are a couple of scenarios. It's not, I'd give it 50-50 chance altogether. Here's the two things that may force a unity government. Number one, obviously the issue of if people break, whether it's Likud members or Yamina Hadash or somebody else breaks from the 55 bloc, that could cause a chain reaction. And of course, the threat that Gantz will make a deal with the Arabs and Lieberman for a minority government, that threat, not necessarily the actual government, but the threat of that government might also force a break. I think something else we have to keep in mind has happened. The moment that Gantz got the job as being the person responsible for forming the government and spoke for 17 minutes in prime time, and it looked like, in American terms, of presidential, and Israeli prime minister-ish, but however you want to define it in Israel, he looked like he could be a prime minister. And for all this time, one of Netanyahu's great advantages has been that no one else could replace him. Suddenly, the polls are showing even who people think are the most capable of being prime minister. For the first time in, I don't know, maybe 10 years, someone else has reached a level amongst the Israeli public as being suitable.
Now, Jeremy, why don't you speak to that? Because
Sure. I mean, speeches don't convince MKs to vote confidence for a government they don't agree on. Look, there are three options we have here. One is that Gantz is able to form a coalition. The second is that the third person who receives the mandate is able to do it. And then the third option is we go to another election. God help us if we do. I really hope we don't. I think what is more likely is that we will have the third person get the mandate. I don't think Gantz has any path to form a government. Well, he has a block of 44 MKs, and he needs Lieberman and the Joint List to vote for a government they will not be a part of.
Well, so that brings me to my question is, what would it take for the right-wing bloc to break during these second negotiations, if anything?
Well, what Gantz is hoping is going to happen is that Mandelblit, the Attorney General, is going to decide that he's going to indict Netanyahu over the next 27 days. Assuming that doesn't happen, Gantz really doesn't have anything else. I mean, the entire plan that Gantz has put together is that Likud is supposed to oust Netanyahu. If Likud does not oust Netanyahu, and I do not expect them to do, don't expect Likud's coalition partners to go ahead and do the job for them. And again, there's no reason for Likud to oust Netanyahu at this time, and Gantz is just going ahead and trying to pretend that he's able to fill up that time until the magic announcement of the Attorney General, which might not come.
I think there is a reason why we could expect. They don't want another election. I mean, no one wants another election. But the general fear, from the Likud standpoint, is they'll do worse the third time than they did the second time they did the first time. The second time they went down in votes. And the general consensus amongst experts is they'll go down further the third time. Not that these people are going to go and vote for somebody else. They'll just stay home. And I think that is the great fear. Plus what I said a moment ago, the fact that more and more people look at Gantz and say, well, you know what? He could be prime minister. I mean, we're not talking about some crazy left-winger. We're talking about someone who was the chief of staff of the army, sitting with two other chiefs of the staffs of the army. It's really hard to be afraid of them being prime minister. Let's put it that way. It's really afraid to say, well, it's dangerous times. We can't have someone who doesn't know what he's doing being prime minister. So look at him. He looks competent. He looks like he could be a prime minister. He has the background, security-wise, to be prime minister, which is what everyone cares about in this country. Let's be honest. That's what the most every election has been about.
And there seems to be a suggestion that he is now considering breaking off from, working with Yair Lapid.
That is just spin from.
I mean, that is actually one potential path in terms of how you could have a government.
But that's just spin from the right.
Look, I'm listening to Marc. I don't see this happening. I don't see members of right-wing parties going ahead and endorsing a prime minister candidate who's about to sit down with Ahmed Tibi and Ayman Odeh of the Joint List. They need to get reelected too, unless you want to have Otzma get 50 seats in the next election. So don't expect the 55 MKs of the right-wing bloc to go ahead
because they're going to meet with Israeli Arabs. That's
it's not about meeting with Israeli Arabs or Israeli Arabs in other parties besides the Joint List. It's specifically a party that goes ahead and does not accept Israel as a Jewish and democratic state. It's a party that specifically goes ahead and targets members of the right-wing bloc with their rhetoric. So yes, I don't go ahead and expect members of the right-wing bloc to go ahead and endorse Gantz for prime minister when he's being supported by the left and the far left?
Well, he's willing to talk to them. I don't understand. That makes him
He
impossible.
said that they are potential coalition partners.
He says potential
Again,
to talk to.
Do you really see a scenario where Likud MKs would break off and sit in a government that would be formed with members of the joint list?
No, they wouldn't be
Let's
formed
talk
with the
about
joint list.
realistic
But
scenarios
what
here.
about I mean, if there were to be third elections, which this, many are predicting that that's what is going to happen here. The cost to the government, first of all, I mean, is just
astronomical.
Well, it becomes a bigger problem. People don't even realize why it becomes a bigger problem. Until now, we've had a budget. We had passed a 2-year budget 2 years ago.
Yes.
As of January 1st, we no longer have a budget, which means everybody gets, 1 month's worth of the last budget, and of course inflation has taken place, and so
all right, so let us not hope for third elections.
Yeah,
All right,
let's
thank you
skip that
both so much for
eventuality.
joining
Sure.
us.
Coming.